Morning. It is 11 o'clock on a Friday morning, September the 20th, and this is a special edition of Tracking the Tropics. Jeremy Nelson, WJCL Chief Meteorologist, joining us from Savannah. I'm Eric in Orlando. And Jeremy, good morning, my friend. We've got some things.
Yeah, a little special edition here. I know you see this pop up on social media. We've been talking about this for quite some time. The potential for tropical development that would favor next week, Western Caribbean into potentially the Gulf of Mexico. So right now, there's really nothing out there, and the chance from the National Hurricane Center is at 40%. Remember, that's over the next 7 days. Really not expecting anything to develop now through Saturday.
Yeah, so this is an area that is a very hot bed for tropical development this time of year. The water temperatures there, Jeremy, are among the hottest they have ever been. And we're going into a Madden-Julian oscillation phase where there's going to be some added lift in the atmosphere. And I think all the ingredients are coming together that we will see something develop here. The models have been very gangbusters on that.
Yeah, they're pretty consistent with developing something. The bigger uncertainty is sort of the exact timing and then a track of this once it does go into the Gulf of Mexico. So
Right.
obviously, once it's in the Gulf, it's going to bump into some sort of land wherever it moves. The question is kind of where that is at.
Yeah.
We're starting to see maybe some models favoring a few locations
Yeah.
here from run to run, but there's also models that give us a few more questions than answers right now.
Yeah, so let's do this. Let's take a look at the models as they are right now. And it's very important to know that it's still very early in this process, okay? But that said, here's the global models. Now, it's important to note these are we basically took the global models and turned them into spaghetti plots, but we are not running tropical specific models, so we can't give you like those types of plots. And that's Jeremy because simply put, there's just nothing that has yet developed. So because of that, we have to take these models with a particular grain of salt.
And when you mentioned that we don't have this is not an invest right now for this one, we'll probably get that maybe later this weekend or the early part of next week, and then you'll start to see all kinds of these spaghetti plots. But we're trying to get ahead of this a little bit to give people maybe a little bit better idea, especially because once these are in the Gulf, as Eric mentioned, this time of year, some of the tracks really start to favor maybe that north central Gulf Coast area or even the northeastern Gulf. But we've been saying really anywhere, probably that upper Texas coast to Florida right now should be watching this pretty closely.
Well, and it's an interesting point that you make because going all the way back to March 1st, when we put out our hurricane season forecast, we highlight parts of the pattern, both in dates and in locations. This seemingly, if it follows the arc that these models are putting, that would follow our pattern that we were expecting.
Yeah, and one thing we highlighted going back to March 1st when we issued our forecast, we said the absolute number one hotspot this entire season was along the Gulf
Yeah.
Coast, generally part of Louisiana through kind of that Big Bend area of Florida. So we were really watching the Gulf Coast. We've had Francine here recently. Of course, we had Debbie, and also Beryl moved into Texas. That was in
Yeah.
July. So it's been busy in the Gulf Coast, and potentially this could be the fourth storm.
Right. So when we look at the timeline, just so that, and Jeremy, you kind of had already mentioned this a little bit, but just so that we're all on the same page, the next couple of days, you're going to be seeing computer model data online. The hypers are going to be putting stuff out, trying to scare you. But it's going to be folks like Jeremy and I that are trying to help you understand what you're looking at. And we'll look at the raw models. I think there's a value to it, but with perspective and in a really responsible manner. But Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, that's when we think that that low pressure starts to develop. And then by about mid to late next week, that should be about when it's really getting going in the Gulf of Mexico and when there could be some sort of impacts.
Yeah, so I would say hopefully that Sunday, Monday, Tuesday time frame. Timing with this again, probably the back half of next week for anything that would start to get
Yeah.
close to land, and maybe that would be it's sort of vary the dates, the 27th, 28th, 29th. So this isn't something that is all of a sudden going to sneak up and surprise us.
No,
This
we've been,
isn't like
yeah,
a pop-up thunderstorm and then all of a sudden it turns severe. This is something that we're already talking about a good week plus out. It's
right.
just starting to get okay. Where is the consensus track? we'll have to watch any type of strengthening, and then any fine-tuned details within a day or two of
Right.
any shifts in the track. So
100%.
with
Yeah.
tropical forecasting, there are some surprises, but typically you know ahead of time something's going to occur.
Which, and I had talked about this a bit this morning on my coffee talk that I do here at Wesh. It's remarkable the level of technology we have today, right? Because there isn't a cloud in the sky that has organized from us from what will become this system. And yet the models are for the better part of a week now been giving us data. Is it perfect? Certainly not. But Jeremy, you're not perfect. I'm not perfect. But the idea that these computers are already chewing on something that hasn't even developed yet to me is just unbelievable.
Yeah, I think that's a good testament to our science and how it's kind of evolved over time. Again, nothing is quite perfect, but speaking of that, let's go through some of the data here and you can kind of get us started.
Yeah, so this is the American GFS, and what we're looking at is Thursday into Friday, September 27th into the 28th, development and moving ashore somewhere along the northern Gulf Coast. This is the 60. Now, understand we're going to have a new model run coming in here in the next couple of hours. This is the same one that ran at about 6, 7 o'clock this morning, but there's still a very large geographical system in terms of pressure. Looks like I mean, that's 965, 966. So that's a potent hurricane according to the GFS model, Jeremy.
Yeah, and you're taking a look there. That was the operational run,
Yep,
right?
yep. I'll pop up
Okay.
the ensembles next. Yeah,
Okay, so ensembles, remember, we're taking that same model, running it all kinds of different ways. And then what we'll look for there is kind of maybe we just slice the Gulf of Mexico in half from
yep.
north to south. And then are more of those lows on the west of that or the east of it? And I think it's pretty clear a lot of them are
Yep.
kind of center to east.
Yeah, yeah, I would say center to east is where the American GFS model wants. But you notice the timing is a big factor in this, right? Like some of the models are trying to bubble something up like midweek, like next Wednesday. But from like Wednesday all the way through to Wednesday, October 2nd, there are ensemble members putting things through. So there's a pretty big window. So I think that there's the idea of something developing is pretty clear. The timing, the location, it's not exactly dialed in yet. And I think that's what we can read from the ensembles.
Yeah, and it looks like that one that you just had up was kind of like Louisiana, maybe into Florida with
Yeah.
at least a majority of those.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. It looks that way. Let me switch over. We'll look at the operational European model. And Jeremy, this one has kind of been it hasn't been shared online as much, and it's because of a very good reason.
Yeah, and I also don't think if we have to be totally honest, maybe given a scorecard. I know there's some meteorologists, researchers that track the entire season. They kind of give scores to models, but I haven't found the European to be maybe quite as good this hurricane season. You go back to
Yeah.
Debbie, it really kept it east of Florida.
Yep.
GFS made that hop to the west,
Yeah.
off the west coast of Florida, and then eventually the European caught on. But this is definitely maybe a little bit more of an outlier, just kind of what it does, and you
Yeah.
can talk about that, and then we'll get to the ensembles, which may show some difference.
Right, right. So the European model, as it stands here, is much weaker. Okay, this is for example like a depression around Monday the 30th of September, and it's just it kind of it keeps it out west and just tries to bubble something up back over toward Florida. So it's sloppy, it's weak with like maybe some kind of more localized vorticity maxima, if you will. If we look at the ensemble zone, this is where it's different, right? Because you've got the European operational that's kind of weak and sloppy, whereas the operational European model differs than the ensembles. Look at the ensembles here. They're showing lows developing, but there's a very low confidence on location. I would say that the European ensembles are kind of absolutely all over the place.
I mean, that's a spread of at least 800 miles from parts of Florida to Texas.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So that that doesn't bode well for confidence at this point, at least with the European
Right.
model. GFS was showing a little more like north central,
Yep.
northeastern Gulf
Yep.
favoring. This one has some of those members that go to Texas, maybe the north central Gulf
Yeah.
Coast, the eastern part. So that one is definitely a little more all over the place.
Right. This is the European AI model, and I think that it's more in line with all the rest of the models.
Yeah, and that's just like a sort of a operational run, right? That's
Yep.
not any type of
Yeah, no,
ensemble
this is
with that one,
just
right?
the AI, which so it takes
Yep.
I guess the idea is it takes the European model, but throws an artificial intelligence element to it and then re-renders out. Is that kind of the idea there?
I think I've looked at it a little bit this year. Early in the season, I felt like it didn't do maybe the greatest.
Yeah.
Potentially, I guess it's always learning
And to that
if if
point,
if it is AI. So maybe it is starting to get a little better hang of this forecasting thing, right?
right. Yeah, yeah. And then, going further, here's the Canadian model. The Canadian model, interesting, was always very strong with it, but I did notice in this morning's run, it seems like it's kind of weakened it a bit. I mean, that's
It
what is that, a
it almost
998
has
mode?
this look of like a trough or something.
Right.
It's just stretched out,
Right in
and if there's
here.
a front or something, I don't know. I
Yeah.
mean, all of these a week plus out are going to have some bad runs.
Right.
Maybe they're right. Probably they're wrong though. If they're looking really kind of questionable, like,
Right.
we really haven't seen something like that before.
Yep.
Um, so we'll see. And then you did a little bit of research
Yeah.
where you took the National Hurricane Center's area of interest and then plotted sort of storms that have developed there and where they have tracked historically.
Right. So, and this was a super deep dive, but I was like, I feel like we've not talked about this at all. So this is the area of interest, okay? And what's kind of fun, by the way, Jeremy, is every time the Hurricane Center redraws this, I have to go back and manually recalculate everything. But this is the area of interest. So during the months of September and October, where did systems go that developed in that area? And what I found is that frankly, they kind of went all over the place. But if you just look at the climatology of this, it makes sense why most of the models are kind of going with that northern Gulf Coast. Because what I did is I labeled all of the United States landfalls. So from Texas, back in 2020, you had Beta's landfall, then Zeta in 2020. We all remember Earl in 98, Opal in 95, Michael in 2018 was a big one, and then a weaker Gordon in 2000. So those were the United States landfalls. They had to the stipulation here is they had to become a named storm, just to kind of gauge some sort of thinning of it. But you see a very clear kind of northern Gulf Coast corridor there, Jeremy.
Yeah, and that was great work that you did there, and thank you for doing that. I know that was kind of eye opening to just see. Okay, we have this area of interest. Where have storms in the past gone after they developed in this area? So that does show that there is a tendency. If this would start tracking to the north, the chances, if it would clear the Yucatan, maybe it's a tropical system, might not be hooking west northwest. If it starts to go north, it's probably going to be north and then maybe north
Yeah.
northeast.
Yeah, yeah. So at the end of the day, I think the biggest takeaway that we should have is that with nothing having formed yet, we've got computer model data, which is kind of remarkably tightly packed this morning. It'll be interesting to see what the 12Z runs show. But Jeremy, we have to, and I put the little tag there on the top right. Nothing has formed. Model data should be taken loosely. So take it as guidance. Do not take it as gospel. It's still too early to tell whom will be impacted, but there is always the problem with you put something in the Gulf of Mexico, there's going to be a landfall.
Yeah, and also I think it's a good reminder since we've had some of these landfalls already this season. If people prepared some hurricane kits ahead of time, maybe
Yep.
you depleted some of your snacks. Maybe even if you didn't have a storm hit, you
Right.
depleted some of the snacks in
Yeah.
there. Just make sure everything's working. If you did have a flashlight in there, just double check the batteries, things like that. And that's really anywhere I would say along the Gulf Coast.
Yeah.
Do that. Even in my area, you could do that. We had some crazy flooding in parts of our area.
Right.
People did lose some power during Debbie. So just go make sure whatever you prepared before the season or during it
Yeah.
is still ready because we still have several weeks where I term it, you're still kind of in peak season until you get to the mid part of October, where historically it can be very busy late September, early October.
Yeah, typically we find and in the area we're watching right now, as a matter of fact. So yeah. Storm Rider 912 on your page, Jeremy is asking. I'm very curious to know your thoughts of the two lemons in the main development region and if either of those would get a name before this one coming from the Caglo.
I mean, it's possible because there, you said like our one watching for the Yucatan or the Gulf or Caribbean, there's not even like clouds there right
Right,
now. So
right.
those actually have something.
Yep.
If the one would get renamed, that's the remnants of Gordon. So
Yeah.
that would just keep the name Gordon. The other one is actually Invest 96L right now. It just has a 20% chance of development. The thunderstorms did blow up a little bit out there last night. I think that's off to like the southeast of Bermuda.
Yep.
And there you can see it. It's the yellow area in the middle between the other couple areas of interest there. But low chance of development. So at least here in the short term, probably not going to see that named anywhere soon. But sometimes these can ramp up quickly. And again, we're not going to be flying hurricane hunters out there to check it out. So
Right.
this is just basically going to be monitored by satellite data.
And we'll keep our eyes peeled on it and let you know. But I think that even if those were to develop, thankfully they are not really threats. The one that's trying to develop around the Yucatan Peninsula, that would be something of a threat. Maybe not to your area, maybe not to mine. We can certainly hope that it's not a threat to anyone. But when you put a storm system in the Gulf of Mexico, it's trapped, and that certainly is the struggle there. John's asking, what are the overall odds that Northeast Florida will get something? We can't do that yet. I use this analogy, and it's a terrible analogy, but put me in a room with 100 people and ask who's going to be my best friend. Man, I don't know. And that's where we're at in terms of tracking and kind of pinning in future trajectories. There hasn't even been clouds that developed yet with it. So we're watching trends in models, but we just do not know. And anybody that tells you otherwise is a straight hyper. That's just
Yeah, I
bottom
mean,
line.
I think our confidence is increasing. There will be something that gets into
Yeah.
the Gulf, but then the question is the water. You talked about that. I was looking it up the other day. It looks
Yeah.
like at least 86, 87 degrees
Yeah.
over a large part of that, maybe a little warmer
Right.
in some pockets. The Western Gulf, I think, is where the water has cooled slightly
Right.
because Francine moved over that, and maybe some of the areas near the coast haven't recovered quite as much. Off the southeast coast, we had like a very cool start to September. So our water temperature dropped to 78 degrees.
Yeah.
That's another pocket right now that's not all that warm.
Yep.
But this system's going to get developed and then move over warm water. It's not expected to move over any type of cool water in the short
Yeah.
term. Once
Right.
it's formed,
Right, right. And 80 degrees is kind of that litmus test. If it's below
mhm.
80, it's harder to develop tropical stuff. So up by you it would be a different story. But in the Gulf of Mexico, everything is well above 80 degrees. So yeah, that's the case. Marcio Brown over on YouTube is asking, should Metro Atlanta be on the lookout? Anyone that lives in that area of the Gulf Coast needs to be watching this. And that's the mode we're in right now. We are not in the like, tell me if it's going to hit Denellen. Tell me if it's going to hit Tybee. We're not there. We're absolutely just not there yet. You know what I mean? So we have to understand that.
Yes. So I'm watching over here, and I know we discussed this
Yeah.
before we went on. I'm watching the icon model. So
Yep.
you had that on your little chart. Can you bring that up for 1 second?
Yep. Yep. You'll have to give me a few
All
seconds.
our little handmade kind of spaghetti plot chart, because the icon model is coming in right now, and I compared it. So we look at all these different models, and when we talk about it's a 12Z or a 6Z or an 18Z, some people don't quite know what that is. So let's go over that. 12Z is 8 a.m. and then 18Z is 2 p.m. Eastern time. You get to 0Z, that's 8 p.m., and 6Z, that is 2 a.m. So what the icon model coming in right now is the 12Z run. That's the freshest one. Is that what
Yep.
you have up there right
Yeah,
now?
that's the
Okay.
12Z run, and that's through
So,
126 hours.
yep. So I went and compared it to the run last night, the 0Z. And this is definitely a little more east and north. So this, again, maybe is favoring that north or northeastern turn because it's staying out of that kind of Bay of
Yeah.
Campeche, as you like to say, or the Western Gulf.
Yeah. All right. So check this out, Jeremy. So this is 12Z. Look at where it is through 126 hours. Let me take this exact moment and go to the 0Z. Ready? Three,
Yep.
2, 1. You see that jump?
Okay.
I'll go
Yep.
back. 0Z, 3, 2, 1, back to 12Z. So it's a little faster and a little further to the east there.
Okay. Now, Okay, that's a snapshot of one model run. So what Eric, myself do, other meteorologists, we typically look for model consistency or trends. So I would not say one change from run to run is significant, but if we start to see this over maybe two or
Yeah.
three successive runs, or other models are like, okay, we just updated, and also we're more north northeast now, then those are kind of clues we take to help our forecast down the road.
Right. And you look for trends, right? Like we talk about in computer models, consistency breeds confidence. And at least in terms of the global models, at the moment there's consistency. So I feel like, remember, there's nothing that's developed yet, but I feel like they're at least starting to dial into an idea. And then as something develops, Jeremy, I fully expect everything to get wishy-washy again, as it's like, oh, wait a minute, now we've got something to figure out. So it's like this is a process and we cannot get ahead of ourselves. So I see a lot of people asking things like, should the southeast coast of Florida be concerned? We should all be watching. I don't think anybody needs to be concerned. If you follow some of the meteorologists who are throwing out scary hype stuff, then sure, it's easy to get hyped and concerned, but nobody should be concerned just yet.
Yeah, so I mean, we're saying anywhere along the Gulf Coast, watch it. We have favored locations, though. I mean, we can't deny it. Back on March the 1st, for this part of the pattern, we
Yeah.
highlighted sort of north central, northeastern Gulf. So, I mean, those are our initial thoughts. Obviously, we're going to watch what happens with model data coming in now in case there's a change here or there. But the icon that is coming in right now, this is definitely faster and it's more north northeast.
Right. And Jeremy, you were talking about that forecast. So I do feel the need to at least show it. Okay. So let me switch from
Yeah,
the icon.
absolutely.
This is the area that we highlighted for this part of the pattern. We called it the Gulf to Carolinas low because during our observation, this part of the pattern wanted to pass through the Gulf Coast and eventually end up kind of along the Carolina coast. But note, we'll just take for a moment just looking at the Gulf coastline and the dates. Okay. And that is absolutely the coastline that we're kind of thinking. Um, and notice the dates, September 20th through the 28th. That's where we are. And I would add that if you look one cycle prior, August 5th through the 12th, what happened during that period?
We had landfall of Debbie as a
Yep.
hurricane in the
Yep.
Big Bend area. The center of circulation moved directly over Savannah. We had just over 10 inches of rain here in Savannah, some
Yep.
gusty winds, and then it moved offshore and it made a second landfall in the Carolinas.
Yep.
So, not saying we would have two landfalls or
Right.
anything like that, but again, that red shaded area going all the way back to our forecast on March the 1st, this is a part of the pattern we've really been dialed into. And I know this has been one of the biggest impact parts of the entire cycle for my area.
Yep.
And we wrote that up and I put that down for the March 1st forecast.
Yeah.
And we'll see what happens this time. So I do want to mention, though, if the icon would happen to be catching on to something or
Hmm.
these other models
Hmm.
where it maybe doesn't hop over the Yucatan or
Yeah.
get in the Western Gulf, it is going to be arriving sooner. Maybe
Right.
not that 28th, 29th, but then we'd have to watch like probably around
26th,
late
27th.
25th. Yeah, late the
Yeah.
25th through the 27th, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. So nothing's dialed in, okay? I want to make sure we're understanding of that. Either way, what we know, this is what we know. We're watching an area that models are pretty gung ho on development. Outside of that, we'll just have to sit back and wait. And I would add to it that clearly Jeremy and I have added a tracking the tropics. More than likely, we will be adding more next week. Certainly, we'll have Tuesday, but if we need to do more, we will certainly be doing more.
Yeah, whatever is needed, we'll help everyone out with that. Do you have the icon up again? Just because it's the newest thing, and we can take a look at it. The one I'm looking at is through about 144. We'll see how far yours is out there.
I've got 147. There's 147. Look at that. Look at that.
Okay.
Yeah. That's a 996. So that's 153 now. So that's 153 hours, actually through 159. So a Florida panhandle, that's the 12Z. We go back one run and look at the difference. So this is Friday, the 27th. It was in the Gulf, way south. Look at the 12Z, the current run, way north making landfall.
And it's faster, right?
Much faster and a completely different spot. So yes, very different scenario there.
So I think if you just slice north to south the Gulf of Mexico in half, I think it's that center to right
Yep.
is the area that we'll have to watch the closest.
I agree, my friend. All right. Hey, do you have anything else to share?
No, it's model watching time now through about 1:30, 2 p.m. All the latest and greatest
Yeah.
data will come in.
It's a good reminder, friends, no matter where you live, in the Carolinas, in coastal Georgia, in Florida, along the northern Gulf Coast, check your hurricane kits because what you don't want to be is that putz that's there with all the other freaker outers dealing with the long lines. Just have what you need. We say this at the beginning of
Yeah.
hurricane season.
And I would say next week, maybe Monday, we'll be talking again. I know obviously both you and I do additional updates on
Yep.
Facebook, on the web, obviously our TV stuff. So watch us, and we'll definitely be keeping you updated.
Sounds good. Jeremy, thank you very much, my friend. From beautiful Central Florida, I'm West 2 meteorologist Eric Burris.
And in Savannah, Georgia, I'm WJCL 22 Chief Meteorologist Jeremy Nelson.
See you, buddy.